let's do this. So let's talk about, so the elections are coming up next year. Let's talk about the economy real quick. And then if we have time, we might go to another clip, but let's just do this real quick because I think this is important. So this is Chris Hayes, and he's going to talk about the U.S. economy because this has been a big issue. So they predicted there was going to be a recession for years now, and it hasn't happened. And Chris Hayes is going to jump into what's happening with the U.S. economy. This is a couple weeks old, but it's still
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are just a few weeks from the first votes, actual votes being cast in the early nominating contest for the presidential election. And one of the main points of discussion, central focuses heading into this election, centers around the economic well-being of our country. That's because, generally speaking, how people feel about the economy writ large is largely predictive of how an incumbent president will perform if and when they run for re-election. A lot of people have noticed that there is a strange paradox at the center of our economy, which is that if you look at many, if not most, of the empirical metrics, the economy is doing surprisingly well. If you look at economic sentiment, however, how people feel about the economy, the numbers are near historically pessimistic. There's a real gap between how the economy is actually doing, at least based on most of the measurements we normally use, and how people think the economy is doing. Or, I should say at the very least, how they tell pollsters they feel about it. You can see it here on this chart. You see how the blue line, how you'd expect people would feel about economic numbers, and the red line, how they actually feel, have usually been in sync, right? Like when things get worse, people feel worse. When they get better, people feel better. Right now, there's a huge gulf between them. That gulf, it is worth noting, does not exist in similar wealthy countries like France and Germany and the UK. It's only here, even though we're doing a lot better than those places. And because...
So that's a great point. And I want to kind of, I want to kind of hammer that home for 1 second. Part of that is the economy is doing really well. And I'll give Biden credit. He's done a lot of really great things to boost the economy, and wage growth is finally going up. But the bottom line is we've had such a gap for such a long time that it's really difficult for some of the average Americans to see it. So when you poll it, they're not getting the benefit necessarily. I mean, they've gotten some, but not enough to make a material difference in their life.
Right.
And it's kind of a devastating thing. And this is the big hurdle that Biden and the Democrats are going to have to overcome next year, which is getting the people to realize that, things have actually gotten better. But it's incremental. And part of it's because there's a huge gap where you have the ultra wealthy and then you just have the rest of us. And the ultra wealthy.
Sometimes what happens in life, and I don't even mean this in numbers, but we sort of become a little desensitized to things like, you gained a little weight, but you kind of didn't notice because it was sort of happening in these little increments, right? Or
right.
It's like that with anything. And so that just makes me think of your point of one of the tricky parts is communicating that growth, making it seem obvious.
Right.
Oh,
absolutely.
You wake up 50 pounds later and you notice, but you wake up 5 pounds later and you might not really notice until you have to go up a pant size, right?
Right. Well, and we could do a whole hour on this, and I'm just gonna wrap it up here in a couple minutes. But so here was just here's a great article from Yahoo Finance. 3 years in Bidenomics, 4 things that went right, 3 things that went wrong. All right, so they're just scrolling through. Hang on, come on. Okay, inflation fell pretty sharply. Job growth actually has been really good. Let's see. The Federal Reserve just recently, they're going to hold off on raising rates, and they're going to try and lower rates starting at the end of next year to get to a soft recession, right? But you go through this whole thing, and it's what really comes down to is the big things is the economy has done really well. The main issue is that not everybody's feeling it. Not everybody's seeing it. And part of that's because of there's just a big gap, right? So unemployment rate has stayed pretty steady. Job growth has actually been pretty good. Inflation has been really good. But the thing is, when you look at all these numbers comparatively, and please go look up the article. I mean, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. It doesn't always factor into the broader community, and that's kind of the issue here. And like you said, sometimes it's gradual, but the question is yeah, it's gradual, but is it actually going to affect them in a positive way? I think it will. I mean, honestly, I really do. But like you said, it's going to take years. It's not going to happen overnight. It'd be nice if it did, but it just doesn't work that way. But I want to do one more clip here real quick. Medhi Hasan is going to talk about kind of what's going on with the economy and how it's going. But it's so much better than it was under Trump. It's better than it was under any Republican.
Republicans say the economy is the worst it's been for 40 years, but it isn't. Don't take my word for it. Look at the numbers. Number one, jobs. Unemployment is at 3.5%. It's been below 4% for 17 months in a row. Joe Biden has added more than 12 million jobs to the economy. No president has done that before in a single 4-year term. Number two, manufacturing. We now have a boom in infrastructure spending, and that's according to Morgan Stanley Bank. They say we have a boom as a result of Joe Biden's Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, as a result of his Chips and Science Act, as a result of his Inflation Reduction Act. Let's talk about number three, growth. Growth is up. It exceeds expectations quarter after quarter. In fact, Bloomberg said there was a 100% chance of a recession this year. Guess what? We haven't had a recession. There's no recession in sight. Number four, inflation. Inflation was at record levels last year, but now it's down to 3%. It's gone down 12 months in a row. And number five, wages. Real wages are up. Workers are benefiting. Income inequality is actually falling. When you look at the numbers, Bidenomics is nothing short of a miracle right now. Republicans say...
So he's right. I mean, and the bottom line is it's getting better. It's just, it doesn't always immediately affect everybody. And that's the message that's not getting out. And the issue becomes there are bigger problems that we have, which is wealth inequality, right? And income inequality. But the bottom line is it's slowly getting better, which honestly, boys and girls, Lacey and I have not seen in our adult lifetimes. We've seen nothing but stagnant wage growth while productivity skyrocketed. It's always been a loose labor market where there's less people than jobs, and they could basically get us for fucking pennies on the dollar because we were desperate. And now it's changed. Now it's a tight labor market where they have to start bargaining for us, and wages are going up. And part of this is a result of the pandemic, and part of this is a result of Biden actually putting through all these measures and all these different things to try and flip the scale a little bit.
Right.
Because the bottom line is this country is built on a middle class and a strong middle class. And the more of us that are middle class and the fewer of us that are poor, the more powerful we are. And this idea that, oh, some people get to be ultra billionaires and the rest of us just get the leftovers. Once you start playing that card too much, what ends up happening, you end up having nothing but in a landed gentry, an aristocratic society, and a bunch of fucking peasants that they abuse. And then what happens? Revolution. Always. And it's especially in this country. And I'll give the Republicans that. It's a good thing they pushed for guns to be legal, because now we can kill all of them later on. If that's what it comes down to. Because we have easy access to firearms. And there's a lot more of us than there are them. I think it's just a missed point. But I think there's a good point here for the argument for the 2024 election, which is we need to rebuild the middle class. We need to make quality of life better for as many people as possible. And we need to get as many people working in the workforce, part of the workforce, and prospering in the workforce. If we can do that.
Wait a minute, hold on. Are you suggesting that maybe more than just a small handful of people could win with money, and then it kind of like would be good for everybody?
Yeah, the high tide raises all boats. Amazing. What? That's not just me, boys and girls.
Chattering.
It's not just me, boys and girls. That's every fucking economist. And economists are not wealthy guys. Most economists are fucking academics. They're professors. They don't make millions of dollars a year. So, yeah, it's not a corrupt idea.
Yeah, but there's also just this weird mindset, and I'm not trying to take this, too far another direction, but there is this kind of weird mindset that, and it's based on people's experiences and observations, but there's this mindset of, only certain people get to have, only certain people get to, prosper. So it's it's an issue, the mental hang up too.
Yeah, it's also this idea that certain people deserve it or they're better by whatever virtue or hard work or whatever. And that's just not the case. There are a lot of people that work their asses off that are very virtuous that never get anywhere.
Sure.
So you can't sit there and tell me, you're basically trying to sell me the hooker with a heart of gold here. I mean,
right.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's so rare that it's almost not worth discussing. But anyway, let's we got a few minutes. Do you have a few minutes left, or how are you doing for time?
Yeah. Though I have to say my brain is fading, so are we gonna just do one more?
We're gonna do a Ramsey one, and then we're gonna bail. Is that cool?
All right. Yeah, let's do. I'm just noticing my brain is being more drifty now.
That's okay. Yeah, no, we'll do one more, and then we're out. All right, boys and girls.